really, it lies at the heart of the mission here at CBH. So, oh, I guess I'm to read this. Okay. Inspired by the chutzpah of our founder, CBH's mission is to promote a bold and expansive Jewish identity and culture, emphasizing inclusivity and social justice as we uphold our commitment to serve the LGBTQ community and all of our allies. So we're honored to have with us tonight. Hi. All right, here's who we have. We have Noelle, is it D'Amico? I was gonna say that. I really was. And she's with the House District 90. Oh, wait a minute, I totally messed this up. Let's start with Sarah. Jesus, I'm bad tonight. Sarah Draper. Syra. Here, you say it for me. Thank you. Draper, right? She represents House District 90 in the Georgia House of Representatives. Noelle D'Amico, and she's with Worker Circle National Director of Social Justice. Wow, that is a mouthful. April Albright. Thank you, April. Thank you. Amen, sister. Black Voters Matter Chief of Staff. And she's presenting their new coalition, the Black and Jewish Partnership for Democracy. Yeah, I like that. Each of these women is a civil right expert and a hero in their own rights, and their deep experience in the field of elections and democracy. So as we know, our faiths, they're tied up with one another, tied up with our Jewish tradition, which teaches, thank you, which is justice, and justice shall pursue. And that's why we are all here together. So I want to thank our guests. I also want to thank Rabbi Mike and Anthony. I saw Anthony, there he is, for their support for this event. Rabbi John, for their support for this event, as well as to the Rabbi Josh Social Justice Fund, to Ellen Mazer and Andy Siegel. I especially want to thank the Tikkun Olam Vod and to the entire CBH staff. Without you guys, these things wouldn't happen. So really, on behalf of the board, I really, really, really do thank you. Rabbi Mike, that's all I got. I'm giving it to you.
Okay, so might move this up a little bit. I don't know if you want to hear what I ate for lunch. I'm gonna move it up here. For the belly button, the Pippic. Yeah. So thank you, Marcy. I am Mike Rothbaum. I'm the rabbi of Congregation Bet Havarim here in Atlanta. It is a great blessing to serve this amazing community of people who have that holy chutzpah. Speaking of holiness, that was a segue. I want to talk about the Parsha for this week, the Torah portion, the Torah reading for this week. It's from the middle, the very core of the middle book of the Torah, which is Leviticus. We're in Parshat Kedoshim. God tells Moses to instruct the Israelites, you should all be Kedoshim, you should all be holy. Why? Ki kadosh ani, because I, says God, am holy. Make yourself holy by making yourself godlike. There are some traditions that say that we have to reduce ourselves and we have to play small, we have to diminish ourselves. And here in our Torah, we're being told to be big, to embrace gadlut or godless, bigness, our hugeness even, because we have some huge challenges in this world. And we need to answer them with the hugeness of spirit. How do we do that? How are we supposed to be holy? How are we supposed to be godlike? Tells us in Kedoshim, a lot of it has to do with how we construct our society, how we interact with each other in society. These are not nice things to do. These aren't best practices. This is holy obligation to one another. And a lot of these instructions involve imbalances of power. Laws regarding relatively weaker groups, the elderly, consumers, immigrants, workers. If you got more power, you got to share it with somebody else. So if you've got more power because you own more land, you got to leave some of that land for somebody else. If you have power because you got capital and you can hire and fire somebody, you better share that power with the workers and not oppress them, because that is unholy. If you are a judge and you've got the power of justice and judgment, stealing, lying, false denials, that is forbidden. You have to share, you have to have open borders of justice to include everybody. Otherwise, what you're doing is an avel b'mishpat, a violent injustice of discrimination. We don't always think about these things as religious, but the core of the Torah, the literal core of the Torah, is telling us this is the holy core. In other words, having just celebrated Passover, God is saying, I didn't bring you out of slavery just so you could enslave each other. To oppress the person who is under you makes you a little Pharaoh. And like Abraham Joshua Heschel says, it's bad to be a slave. It's a tragedy to be Pharaoh. So how do we share? How do we open our borders and our boundaries to the people who quote unquote are less than? How do we recognize that actually to be holy is to say that's nonsense, that those boundaries are temporary? That's what we're hoping to do tonight, right? We talked about in the promotion. Now, see, I got a bunch of stuff from Ellen and Andy I got to tell you, because if I don't, I'm in trouble, right? So it said, are you frustrated, scared, depressed by the onslaught of voter suppression, anti-LGBTQ, anti-choice, anti-immigrant initiatives? Well, let's do something about it. Don't be depressed. As my teacher, Ruth Messenger says, despair is not a strategy. So we are grateful to the Rabbi Josh Social Justice Fund for the grant that makes this possible. We want you to know that we are mindful of our 501c3 restrictions. As a nonprofit, we are not endorsing any candidates. What you do with your vote is your business. We are helping you to feel empowered, to help make fair elections, to make tangible differences, tangible actions that you. Okay, I'm going to skip some of this. The part that isn't starred, Alan, I promise, because we want to get to the people. After the presenters have spoken, we will open the floor for you to share those tangible actions that you're doing and compile ideas together, because there ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people. Don't stop, right? Thank you. Somebody knew. Ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people. Okay, fine, thank you. All right, let's start. Let's jump right in. Our first speaker. Right, I got to read what I was told to read. Hold on. It's not in order, Ellen.
It's important, Rabbi.
It's important, Ellen. It's not in order. Okay. Representative Syra Draper, one of the state's leading voices for election rights, an issue that affects every office, from local school board to the state's winner-take-all electoral college votes. Maybe you know a little bit about it. Syra has had an interest. Can I call you Syra? Okay, because I want to show you respect. An interesting career trajectory, a degree from a prestigious law school, joined a silk stocking firm with corporate clients. And as part of the firm's pro bono work, Syra led a task force representing migrant children. After the 2016 election, she was on the border in Laredo, Texas, and decided to continue her work on behalf of those children, taking a pay cut to do immigration law full-time at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Yeah. Andy wrote this? No way. Andy Siegel is a journalist in our congregation. I'm gonna cut to the chase. Syra had come to see that you can not only address problems, you also have to fix problems. That's why she took another pay cut when she was elected to the state legislature. Syra, will you start us off?
Absolutely, yes, and I see my friend Susan online. I'll just sit if that's okay, if that's all right for everybody, unless there's a preference, yeah? Okay, so I am so glad to be here tonight and just so appreciative for this opportunity and to sit here with these great minds, and to Ellen, who is not only my friend, but maybe more importantly, my constituent. So just very, very grateful to be here in this forum and discuss this, and I think it's so important, the emphasis on hope, because I can talk about despair for a long, long time. What wasn't mentioned was in 2020, I ran the voter protection program for the Democrats here in Georgia. So ran the voter protection arm of the Biden campaign and of the Warnock campaign and of the Ossoff campaign. And so much of that work is organizing. I had about, at the top, I had about 30 staff and 12,000 volunteers across Georgia. And so when I say we out-organized voter suppression in 2020, that is literally what we did. We worked harder and we worked smarter than the other side in order to help people vote. People who were it was purposely being made difficult for them, and we were able to help them get across the finish line so they had ballots that counted. One of the programs that I think a lot of people are familiar with was the ballot curing program. So people would vote by mail in large numbers, especially because of COVID. And their ballots were being rejected. And even if your ballot is because of an error, maybe they didn't sign it, or maybe they put the wrong date or something like that, some kind of technical small error, their ballot would be rejected. But there's rules under Georgia law that you have 3 days to correct that error. They call it a ballot cure. And if you can do that, your vote will count. Well, in the 3 days after the 2020 election, we had thousands and thousands of volunteers drive for miles to cure a single voter's ballot, right? They would find these people who needed ballots to be cured. They would go to their door. They would say, hey, I know you voted in the 2020 election. You may or may not know that your ballot didn't count. Can I walk you through the steps to make your ballot count? And people were overwhelmingly just deeply grateful that this stranger came to their door that they didn't know, drove miles or whatever it was to help them cast that ballot that count. And that more than made the margin of victory in that last election, because we helped cure, in different groups, all the groups helped cure over 15,000 ballots in that election, which of course was more than Biden's margin of victory. So when I say we out-organize voter suppression, I mean that very literally. And in fact, one of my favorite quotes in the aftermath of 2020, Republicans were really mad that things had gone the way they went. And they were blaming the party, and they were blaming the Secretary of State, and the Deputy Secretary of State basically said, well, one side had a ballot curing operation and the other side didn't, so what do you want me to do? So it was kind of a hat tip to what we had put up. Now, what I will say is that since 2020, I don't like to talk about this in terms of sides, and I know we're in a 501c3 setting, but I will say that plainly, there is one side that is interested in helping people vote, and there is one side that is not interested in helping people vote because they think that helps them politically. And since 2020, there has been much effort to make voting harder. And I think one of the challenging pieces about what they have done since 2020 is they haven't just made one change. They've made dozens of changes. Right, and each one of these changes individually is going to shave off hundreds of votes, thousands of votes. And because there's so many different ways of shaving those votes, that makes it much more difficult on our side to organize against. Right, because it's not just one thing that we have to do. It's not just a ballot curing operation that we have to put up. We have to help voters in all these different ways. So, I say that because the first step to being able to do that is knowledge and understanding what we're up against, and we are going to be up against a lot this year. One thing I want to, tell me how much time I have, because I want to make sure everyone can speak and that we get to questions and everything. All right, I will just speak to one thing, and then we'll move on. I'm sure there'll be questions and discussion, because I don't want it to be a one-way conversation. I just want to speak briefly about the bill that passed, that was signed yesterday, SB 189. It was a bill, boo, yes, we can boo. It was a bill that we were, as Democrats, fighting very hard against in the General Assembly. They dropped that bill in its final form, which nobody had seen until about 9 o'clock at night on the very last day of the legislative session. It came to the floor at about 9:30, 10 o'clock on the last day of the legislative session, because that's how they do things. They try and get things through in the darkness of night when nobody's paying attention, and they make them really complicated and really big, and you don't have an opportunity to see it, so that when you're fighting against it, you're at a disadvantage, right? One of the things that that bill does, that I just want to bring to everybody's attention, because I think it's going to be the biggest issue in one of the biggest issues in 2024, is it makes voter challenges easier. And just to show of hands, who's familiar with what a voter challenge is? Okay, so it seems like most people, but for those who aren't, any voter has the option to go to their county election office and say, I challenge the eligibility of this voter over here. Originally the idea was, your neighbor moves to Florida, you go to vote, you see your neighbor in the polls, and you're like, hey, that's not right. They don't vote here anymore. So you can go to your county office and say, this person moved to Florida, they shouldn't be voting, I challenge their eligibility. But that process, the voter challenge process, has been weaponized since 2020, so that individuals are now challenging hundreds, maybe thousands of voters at a time with weak, if any, evidence, right? Very weak evidence. And what it is doing is it is causing chaos with our election offices, right? Because even if they have weak evidence, and even if that evidence isn't successful at kicking people off the rolls, what it effectively does is it causes these counties to have to stop what they're doing, stop processing those registrations, stop processing those absentee ballots, stop training their poll officers, whatever it is, and concentrate on processing these mass voter challenges. And they have to reach out to all these people who have been challenged, send them a letter, hold a hearing, consider the evidence, do the research. It's a very laborious, time-intensive process. And under Georgia law, it has now become, since 2020, 2 times now, it has become even easier to do these mass voter challenges. Instead of saying this is clearly something that is being weaponized and politicized, our Republican colleagues have insisted on making the process even easier. So I say this all to say that in 2024, we are going to see a massive increase in the number of voter challenges. But I do see that as an opportunity to organize around, because we know exactly how it is going to happen. And we have an opportunity to speak with voters, to let them know that when you get this letter in the mail that says your eligibility has been challenged, this is what it means, this is what you have to do, this is who you have to call. So there is a way out to all of this if we start early enough. Let's talk about the organizing aspect of it later, but I just want to give all my other colleagues some time to talk. So let me just pause there, and I'd love to pick it up after everyone else has a chance.
All right, we're gonna use this. We're gonna use this one. Oh, all right. Thank you, Representative. Okay, I've got my next script. I'm doing what I'm told. First of all, you see it's a story in the press every couple of years. They seem to recycle a story about how the historic alliance between blacks and Jews is being broken down and is fraying, and oh my God, and there's quotes and there's gnashing of teeth and wringing of hands. And what we know is that quietly in offices and congressional offices and nonprofits and NGOs all over the world, black folks and Jewish folks very often have the same values and work hand in hand. And you can see that in the folks that are gracing our dais this evening. And we're gonna start first with April England Albright, the legal director and chief of staff of the Black Voters Matter Fund, founded in 2016 with a clear mission: increase power in marginalized, predominantly black communities, focusing primarily on southern states, registration, turnout, resisting the kind of laws that we just heard about, training other grassroots groups. I have learned from Andy that you went into the family business because it was your father, John Henry England Jr., who was a prominent lawyer in Tuscaloosa, an associate justice on the Alabama Supreme Court. You can imagine the dinner table conversations, it says here. As for April, with more than 26 years of leading and directing civil rights and voting rights litigation, she has been a lawyer in private practice, a municipal judge in Selma, Alabama, a supervising attorney with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. At the Black Voters Matter Fund, April oversees the organization's restorative justice work and voter protection litigation, and is working with the Jewish community, which we're going to find out in a bit, on this collaborative project. But in the meantime, we are so glad to have you with us.
So I think, it's great that we can talk, but I think it's better when we can talk with each other. So I don't really have much that I want to say in terms of preamble sense, except that I'm really, really glad to be here. I think it's important that we are talking to each other about this election. There are a lot of issues that are, kind of overshadowing our ability sometimes to see each other, and to see that we have things in common. And so I think tonight, I hope that we have an opportunity to talk about those things that we have in common. It's easy for us, practitioners, quote unquote, to talk about the laws that are impacting our ability to vote, telling people we need to go vote. I know I'm speaking in a room where everybody in here is going to go vote. But the thing is, voting is not, it's something that people utilize to change our lives and make it better. And sometimes we lose sight of that when we just talk about voting. And that's why some people don't feel connected to it, And so at Black Voters Matter, one of the things we really try to do is to have similar conversations that we're having tonight in different environments, because we believe that once we see that we have things in common, once we believe and are clear about the things that we are fighting for, more than fighting for, the things that we want, right? Because again, voting is about changing our quality of life and our communities. Once we can have the kind of conversations and get that kind of solidarity, then we can have the passion that it takes to go vote, despite all of the things that you talked about, right, that we are up against. Despite the things that I've seen in litigation, we right now as an organization are in 3 lawsuits in 3 different states, challenging similar laws that were created yesterday, challenging whether or not Black and brown people are going to have their rights to have their political representatives in government at the local and national level. But at the end of the day, all those things are happening because we just simply want to help people have a better quality of life. Who doesn't want that? Right? Who doesn't want that? So that's what our conversation, I hope, is anchored in tonight. That's why we have this partnership, because we understand the climate and we understand the things that are happening and the images that are being seen. And what we've decided to do is we've refused to let go of an allyship that has actually transformed this country. So that is why we're here. And I'm going to pass the mic back to you, or no?
I've got to do what it says here.
Okay.
I'm not allowed to not read what's here. So, representing, ironically, or not so ironically, we'll talk about that if you want, the Jewish part of this Black Jewish Voters Partnership is the Reverend Noelle D'Amico, or surprise, ordained as a minister in the United Church of Christ. She has a special interest in interfaith work, believing that the values we share are more important than the theological languages we use. And that, in part, explains how she came to be the director of social justice at the Arbiter Ring, the Workers' Circle, an organization founded in 1900 by Yiddish-speaking Jews from Eastern Europe. Noelle grew up in an 850 square foot house in a working class neighborhood in Trenton, New Jersey, with parents who were zealous believers in the American dream. But Noelle, as a scholarship student at a fancy prep school in Princeton, soon learned hard truths about wealth and power from classmates who lived in mansions, especially when she ran into graffiti at the school payphone, which read, "Noelle is an effing wop." But it didn't say effing. In her words, I saw the dynamic as to who really counted and who didn't. while her parents thought the best route to success was don't make waves. I've had that. People have told me that too. Yeah. Noelle has made more than her share. Before coming to the Workers' Circle, she spent 11 years organizing congregations and faith leaders to support the farm workers in Immokalee, Florida. And the Coalition of Immokalee Workers is a crew close to both Rabbi Josh's heart and to my heart. An incredibly, we've talked about it, an incredibly inspirational group of folks that included successful boycotts, protest rallies, letters to the editor, dialogue with corporate leaders. Prior to that, she directed the United Churches of Christ's legislative advocacy on Capitol Hill, where she spoke out on, this is like an alphabet of holy work. Abortion rights, children's health care, fair wages, human trafficking, other social justice issues. Her rap sheet includes 10 arrests, count them 10, for civil disobedience. Yes. So much for don't make waves. Pastor.
Thank you. It is such an honor to be with all of you, to be with my colleagues on this days, to be gathered in a place where we have come because we believe it is possible to build a truly multiracial, multicultural democracy that works for every single one of us. Every single one of us. I'm from the Workers' Circle, the Arbiter Ring. Who's heard of the Workers' Circles? Anybody heard? Oh my goodness. I don't really need to explain it to you, but I'm going to show you one or two pictures for those of you who don't know who we are. The Workers' Circle was started back in 1900 when Eastern European immigrants came fleeing pogroms and persecutions, and bringing their knowledge that they developed in the Bund and in resistance to the United States, where they worked to participate fully in democracy and to build democratic freedoms and equality for all. The idea is a better and more beautiful world for all. Yes, thank you, in Yiddish, perfect. This is kind of what we looked like in 1909 at the uprising of the 20,000 as young seamstresses took to the streets to demand democracy in their workplaces. I'm going to frame it that way for a minute so we think about how democracy lives in our workplaces, in our homes, in our schools, as well as in our political life together. They fought for better wages and working conditions and won them in 85% of the factories in New York City. Anybody know one of the factories they didn't win it in? The Triangle Factory, right, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. But after that fire, they went on and continued working. Who did they work with? A. Philip Randolph, who is busy not only organizing, oh my goodness, where does one start with A. Philip Randolph, but not only the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, but also black needle trade workers. And the Workers' Circle was shoulder to shoulder with him in that effort and supporting the messenger and doing shared education with workers at that time. It was A. Philip Randolph who brought us into civil rights work. Way back, 1951, Workers' Circle members were making integrated lobby visits to Congress and the president on civil rights legislation. That was just breaking every taboo. And it really shook things up. In '57, we spoke out calling for an end to the racist filibuster, following Martin Luther King Jr. He said, we got to get rid of this terrible rule that is blocking anti-lynching laws, blocking civil rights laws. And as we move forward, we worked together in the March on Washington. One of the Atlanta leaders actually went with Reverend King to Medgar Evers' funeral in June of 1963, sharing a car there and back. As we moved forward in our work, though, we were awarded a lifetime membership by the NAACP. This is a picture of Roy Wilkinson giving it to some of our Worker Circle leadership back in '63. But you know, it didn't just stop there. And we also knew that after the 2020 election and the insurrection and the tsunami of voter suppression laws that began being passed by the states, we had to reach both into history and to the friends who were standing against this. And that's what brings us to our partnership with Black Voters Matter. And this picture is from the fall of 2021. This is October 2021. I'm the short person right there. This is Cliff. This is Sister Quincy. This is, I'm blanking on his name right now, Reverend from Covington Church, and this is Ben Jealous, who was then with People For. And we were part of a group that got arrested pushing President Biden to say we must lay aside the filibuster in order to pass federal voting rights legislation. Because you know, all this really started in Syria in 2013 with the Supreme Court Shelby v. Holder decision that drove a stake through the heart of the Voting Rights Act. And we need to restore that act to its power, and we need to expand that act, and we need to make so many other democratic reforms in order to strengthen our democracy and make it more inclusive and more responsive and more accountable. But President Biden was thinking that the filibuster was really a tool of bipartisanship in October 2021. And so we had a message for him that day. We were arrested by Secret Service. And you'll see Cliff Albright of Black Voters Matter here. Cliff and I both went first to a Secret Service holding site for many hours where we were handcuffed to either a pole or to a bench. You know, just for this very simple, straightforward request that we really didn't think we should have had to ask the president for to begin with. And then after we were questioned separately and we were brought in for fingerprinting, one of the things that happened was they cut off my wedding ring of 30 years in order to properly, holographically, that's how they do it in the Secret Service, fingerprint me. And I remember the gasp. There were several Secret Service agents in there, and the gasp when they realized this was going to happen. And I stuck out my hand, and the agent that stuck the little tool under it, and you could hear a pin drop. Zzz, 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 dialed this little wheel that cut through the gold band, and then took the pliers and pried it off. 30 years of marriage, I hadn't had it off. And I looked at that, and I thought about the broken promise of democracy. How many times the promise of democracy has been retreated from for any number of reasons. How many people we look back at Reconstruction and then Jim Crow and the horrible violence, right? Right now is a decision moment for us as a nation. We're at a tipping point right now. And so what we believed was most essential at this moment was to stand together. That's why we got arrested, but it's also why when we ended up with no paper arrest, thank goodness, because we would have been 6 months in federal prison with thousands of dollars worth of fines. We lucked out on that one. I was in a car after that with April and Cliff, and as we're driving across to get Cliff's belt and my shoelaces and my wedding ring and driver's license, we started talking about justice and love. Justice and love, and we wondered, what would this look like to stand together in power at this moment? And that's in many ways the birth of the Black and Jewish Partnership for Democracy. And it's what brings us here tonight together, because we believe by bringing our communities together, and not just Black people and Jewish people. We know we're all mixed up. We've got a lot of heritages all over the place, many different races. I'm neither Black nor Jewish. I'm a part of it. So it's about, nobody's perfect. You're so funny. It's about the values that we share, the values of solidarity, that we're not going to let each other go, the value of community, that we're going to listen and be together with one another and bring our communities together. And also, I'm going to say it, the value of courage, because friends, there's some real scary stuff happening out there right now, but we know that people who have come before us were so courageous, and surely we can harvest from what they sacrificed, what they dared for this moment, to strengthen one another, to stand together. And we're going to talk about some of the concrete ways you can be involved in this. And if there's time, we'll show you a little video about how we've brought young adults from the Worker Circle and Black Voters Matter together recently in Selma. But this is just to say this moment is a decision moment for us. But I can't think of a place I'd rather be tonight than right here.
Well, I want to go to your church. Thank you so much. Thank you to all three of you. So this is what I think we should do. So I actually think we should show the video now, actually in just a second, because folks have cards now in Jewish time is 3 minutes from now. People have cards on their chairs. Isn't that, oh, that's not what the video is about?
The video is about bringing young adults together in Selma.
Okay. So it says Democracy Circles videos. That's not right. Okay. So, I'm going to give people instructions and then I'm going to hand it back to you. Okay. So it says you can ask questions if you want, but we talked about the power of the people, right? This is a time for sharing ideas about things that we can do together. So use the cards for questions or specific, tangible, measurable actions you are taking to empower fair elections. Write legibly, we please ask. And if you want to share with the group, when we get to it, you raise your hand. And when I call on you, stand up, say your name and what your actions are. Does that sound right? Okay, good. Pass the cards to Ellen. Can we have another round of applause for Ellen Mazer? Amazing human being. And then you hand me the cards? Is that how this? This was the last minute change, so I'm sorry. Yeah.
The idea was that once we put all our ideas together, I will put them in a document and send it back out to you so that we can share together what we're all doing and work with each other. So
should people start doing that now?
well, I want you to pay attention to the video.
Okay.
So
that's what you can do.
be thinking about it while we watch the video, and you still have to, Noel and April have to talk about democracy circles and roll that out. So you guys decide what.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to hand off to Noel and April.
So since you're thinking about what you can do right now, we thought that I'd talk a little bit about something called Democracy Circles, which is an initiative that we started in the Worker Circle after a bunch of us got arrested with some college students and Latasha and others from Black Voters Matter. After the Freedom to Vote Act, John Lewis Advancement Act did not pass the Senate and died on the filibuster. And we were despairing, right? And so we're on the Amtrak back home, and one of the students, Merle from NYU, says, how are we gonna keep going? We have to think of a way to just stay together and not lose momentum. I feel really isolated. And she said, but these actions have helped me feel connected. What can we do? And so since I'm an organizer, of course, I flipped the question and I said, well, what do you think we should do? And she said, what if people started to gather in small groups together on a regular basis to take action and learn about our democracy so that we're acting out of a background of knowledge, we're informed, but we're also not just talking all the time. We're taking continual actions that meet up with the actions of others. And thus, the idea for democracy circles was born. And I'm just going to show you a few slides that'll give you a little idea of how they work, because they're one of the ways that you might think about organizing your work here as a congregation. So you can see us in Selma. There's Anthony. Check him out, looking good with Noah Barron. So what is a democracy circle? It's very simply a small group of people that you bring together to learn about and take action for our democracy. Why would you start a democracy circle? And by the way, these aren't like Photoshop pictures. These are real live democracy circle pictures. These are students at NYU. Why would you do it? Why would you start it? Because you want to break your isolation and build community and, importantly, grassroots power. It's an opportunity also to bring people who haven't been involved in this fight off the sidelines in a way that can make sense to them. It's a very low bar. I'm sure all of you at some point or the other have had a few people over to your house to have dinner or for Thanksgiving or for some other event. Same thing, just have a few people over, but this time we'll give you some resources to talk about and take action for democracy. So what do democracy circles do? They meet periodically together. The amount of time, it's up to you how frequently they meet. Some meet on Zoom, some meet in person. And they take action for democracy. What are some of the things they can do? Well, we've been phone banking to ensure that Black voters in Georgia right now have the information they need for early voting. We have been sending postcards to Virginia. We have been canvassing. We have had people volunteer as poll workers. There are an array of actions that you can take. And then you want to always be learning. So we have somewhere around 40-some resources that are nonpartisan resources, evidence-based resources, so not Joe's conspiratorial website, but resources from the Brennan Center, for example. And you can dip into different topics. Maybe you want to start with your democracy stories that'll allow people to think about the first time they voted, or what their first political memory was, or what it is that moves them to take action. Maybe you're an arts and culture person, so you're interested in how the arts and culture can be used for resistance in difficult times. Or maybe you'd like to learn a little bit more about history, or about current legislation. Or maybe, well, you know, the Supreme Court seems pretty problematic now, but then what are all those circuit courts and how in the world do the courts work? Maybe you want to learn a little bit about how democracy works now. Each resource is short, and it has a series of simple discussion questions to help you jumpstart your conversation. So we provide getting it started guide, an outreach tips guide, take action resources, and discussion resources. And the reason we do this is not everybody has always reached out to people, right? Sometimes it's hard to get started. We help you over the hump. You might be worried, oh, I asked 6 people to come and only 1 person got back to me and she said not at this time. Should I email them again? You know, we give you our organizers' background tips on, you know, how to assess when to go back and ask again. And we try to make it easier, you know, bring the comfort down, you know, so that bring the comfort up so that everybody feels comfortable. Anybody can be a convener. You're just reaching out to people that you know, you set a time and place to gather, and you serve as a circle's support point person for support. That way you get our newest resources, you get take action opportunities, and periodically conveners gather together on Zoom to share best practices. This is one of our social justice organizers, Noah Barron. Noah will reach out to you when you sign up to start a democracy circle and help you along the way, help you imagine what you'd like to create. There's lots of different ways to do it. It's a very flexible model. It could be a few people around a kitchen table. You can deploy multiple circles in a congregation or use the resources and the take actions for regular whole congregational take actions. You can go into the streets and then use ours as a way to debrief and think about what you've been doing. Or maybe you're an organizer yourself and you're thinking about, how do I bring all these groups that come together maybe 4 times a year? What's the glue? I need some glue to keep these people connected. Democracy circles work for that too. These are a few pictures of some of our democracy circles postcarding. This from Colorado. This is a UCC church in California that's decided to adopt democracy circles, and they're doing a discussion. And then this is art, and I end on this slide because Art is a child survivor of the Holocaust. And what Art was really looking for was a community where he could be honest and he could be free and he could know that he would be heard and that he was prepared to listen and give support to others. And that for him was essential in facing what, and I will just say it plain, the Workers' Circle's been calling it, the rise of a politics of fascism in our country. And we think it's important to name that because by naming it, we can confront it together. So that's a little bit about democracy circles, and you can use them in every which way, totally malleable. We hope you'll think about them as a possible way to organize work that you're doing. Oh, there's a sign-up sheet. If some of you have said, that's great, I want to sign up tonight, we have some sign-up sheets for democracy circles. And you just put down your name, and Noah, that friendly face on the slide, will give you a buzz and say, hi, I hear you'd like to start a democracy circle. How can I help?
Or I should say, the Secret and Long Committee will, they take hold of our signups and try to sign us up as a congregation.
Oh, perfect. So just, it'll go through the Tikkun Olam committee, who will, instead of come to me, it'll go to Tikkun Olam. Different groups do it different ways. Pardon me, I got out ahead of my skis there. So Tikkun Olam committee will sign you all up as a congregation. Okay, wonderful.
So are there any cards?
Questions?
Questions?
Statements? Cards? Whatever you want to say.
Or do we? Cheryl, why don't you just stand up? All right, I'll read it for you. I'll read it for you. Okay. Cheryl is one of our superstars. If you don't know Cheryl, you should. Field Team 6, which is different from SEAL Team 6, right?
But he named it Joseph Berlin named it after that.
Joseph. No, just you can tell. I'll repeat it.
Oh, okay. Joseph Berlin, the person who founded this, who was a comedy writer and
Joseph Berlin, who founded it,
2016,
comedy writer,
named it after that.
named it after that. So it's supposed to be like that. Registering Democrats to save the world?
Correct.
Wow, okay. Be bold. Voter registration in battleground states, Florida, in flippable districts, including in Georgia, phone banks. Bring your own, what's BYOP? Bring your own.
Your own phone and free text.
Bring your own phone. That makes sense. Free texting, in-person voter drives, postcarding, social media storming. All right. I told you she was a superstar. What? We can just have people say it.
Hi,
Thanks, Rebecca.
Jackie Sherman. I want to ask a couple of questions. You talked about educating voters related to voter suppression. Talk about either what you all are doing or what you are asking us to consider doing, it's the first time that I've heard about an educating project, and I'm interested.
Yeah, so a lot of these programs are ramping up now. It's hard to organize an education program when the laws aren't even set, right? So now that we know what we're working with, there's an opportunity to build around that, organize around that. I personally was at the Democratic Party of Georgia, and we have an entire voter protection operation there that works on exactly this, organizing around these issues of voter suppression. There were lots of opportunities to get involved. Perhaps one of the most popular ones is a voter protection hotline. Where we have operators who are trained in voter protection issues, a lot of the basic stuff like registration, where you vote, how you vote, but also more complex stuff as ballots start getting lost in the mail, or you find out about an issue in South Georgia, voter intimidation. We train operators to deal with these calls, and it's a fantastic opportunity. Because a lot of the calls that you do when you're organizing is you're calling to someone and asking them to do something for you. But when you're on the voter protection hotline, people are calling you and asking for help. So it's a very different dynamic. If you've ever done organizing and gotten a little off with the calls, it's really, really different. Yes, Jackie.
A lot of people at CVH did that during the last couple of elections. I didn't realize that was fit in that category.
Yeah.
So.
And there's both a partisan side to it, like the Democratic Party of Georgia
Yeah.
will do it. There's also non-partisan operations that do something similar. I know the Lawyers Committee has and a lot of the C3 organizations also have hotlines. So, depending on which you want to do, there's lots of opportunities there. But all of these, the hotline is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many different programs, poll watching, of course, becoming a poll worker.
How many people in this room are poll workers, poll watchers?
Both, because they're both critically important. Nope, there's people online too. Yes, I see hands up.
Those hotlines are one thing. Oh, I have a lot. Those hotlines are one thing. But having people on the ground locally at those polling places really matter.
And I want to tell a very fast story. I started telling you a story about the volunteers that helped people cure their ballots after the 2020 election and how excited they were to do that work and how grateful people were to receive them at their door. But one of my favorite parts of the story is how that finished off that election cycle, which in 2021, January 2021, we had the dual Senate runoffs. And it turned out that a ballot curing operation wasn't really needed because the senators had won without needing those cured ballots, unlike the Biden election. But those volunteers were so committed to the principle of democracy, they spent the next 3 days doing it anyway. And I find that to be such a beautiful story because in some ways this work of bringing people to democracy, helping people vote, it really transcends what we think of as the traditional transactional nature of politics when you're asking people for something. Now we're helping you with something. And those kinds of relationships and those kinds of interactions are such high quality interactions that you're gonna get returns that are tenfold from those kinds of things. So I think it's really important to be thinking about things. And when it comes to elections, you can get so bogged down in the now and win or lose, but there is a very much a greater principle at play. And I think volunteers here who want to be committed to that work, we need to be thinking about it big picture.
So we have some folks on Zoom, which you can't see in the room, so I'm going to read them. Elizabeth Geiger says, I'm a participant in the Georgia Postcard Project. We pick up a set of cards from a volunteer, write cards encouraging people to vote. It does say vote blue, even though as a 501c3, we're not telling you to do that. Return the cards, and the project sends them to voters across the state. Susan Kupferberg says, I'm a volunteer on the Voter Protection Hotline. I review reports filed by volunteers who attend county election board meetings to identify and flag barriers to voting. God bless you for going to an election board meeting. It's important and it's not exciting until it is. This process is being conducted across Georgia. I organize, host, and attend fundraisers for candidates. I am a board member of the Georgia Alliance for Progress, which funds dozens of grassroots partner organizations across Georgia. And then Sarah Zaslaw told us recently, but I'll repeat it, several times a month I register new citizens to vote. I'm also a poll worker. In recent years, I also held a couple of temporary part-time voter coordination related second jobs, one at New American Pathways and one at Emory. And of course, we've got folks here who are intimately involved in New American Pathways. So this is what we talk about when we say we come together in the power of the people. We tell each other the things we can do. Steve. All right. Mike. Emily is bringing Steve Osheroff.
I have
Thank
a
you,
question for either Representative Draper or for April. I understand that Governor Kemp signed an unconstitutional law saying that the voter rolls can be cleared up to 45 days prior to an election, and that is there's a law, a federal law in place that says it can't be any sooner than 90 days before an election. So what is being done already to make that not happen?
So it's not unconstitutional until the court says it is, right? This is an issue that we encountered when voter challenges were getting hot in 2020 and in 2022 as well. The National Voter Registration Act, NVRA, says that you can't do systemic removal of people from the rolls more if it's within 90 days of an election. And Georgia has taken the position that these mass voter challenges are not that. They're not systemic removal. So we have regular list maintenance of the voter rolls all the time, especially on off years. They're removing people from the rolls who have moved and have not voted for a certain period of time. On a more frequent basis, they remove people from the rolls who have died. So there's regular list maintenance processes. And what the federal law says is you can't have that systemic kind of removal within 90 days. So whether or not these mass voter challenges are systemic is a question for the courts to decide. And I don't know if there's any litigation on that front yet.
Yeah, there are, yeah. I think that what we've got to understand is that, there are malicious actors. And there is a very conservative court, and you probably know this, the 11th Circuit is one of those most conservative, appellate districts that we have in the country. And so, but what we need to be clear about is that it is a concerted strategy, right? It is not happen chance that they are producing these types of laws in the state houses that they know will make their way into conservative circuits, that they believe if they go to the Supreme Court will be rubber stamped, that they would find a way to change the law. So we have to understand that. But it's not where the story has to end. Right? Despite the concerted efforts of malicious behavior in order to keep power, the story doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be a period there. But in order for there not to be a period there, is that we have to do what the other side does. It's a 365-day work that coalitions like the one that we see in this room have to launch. We have to take back the state houses, period. Unfortunately, one party that is probably affiliated with a lot of people in this room has made a decision to give up on the South. And we have to be honest about that. That a lot of the states are the way they are because one progressive party has made a decision that their money and that their attention is aligned with the federal strategy and have left the state houses in the South to their own. And that is why we see the condition of the South the way that it is. So we have to recommit ourselves. In Georgia, we've done that because Georgia was not a priority for one of the parties. We saved ourselves and we made ourselves a priority, right? Now, Georgia is a national priority because of the organizing that has happened in this state. And the same thing has to happen in every other southern state because that is how they are, what they say, as the South goes, so does this country. That is real. That is not made up. And they know it. So we have got to make sure that we are just as obsessed with who is in that state house and the governorship and the city council and the county commissions as we are with who's in the White House. It doesn't mean that we give up, we ignore what's happening on the federal level. It just means that we've got to do a better job of fighting for these state houses where she is, because that's where these laws are happening. And what they know is, if I can just get it signed, it's going to take you 2 years for you to get it declared unconstitutional. And in 2 years, you have hundreds of elections that are going to happen with those crazy decisions in place. So I'm glad you brought that up. That is important. It is unconstitutional, but it's probably going to take us a long time to get somebody to actually say it.
Some hope, because, you know, the Georgia House is close-ish to flipping. It is close, maybe I should say close, it's close to flipping, right? It's close to flipping. So right now, Republicans have a trifecta at the state level. They have the governor's mansion, the House, the Senate. But with the state House, we're about 6 seats away from flipping it, and that is the single most impactful thing we can do to change policy in Georgia. Because if we flip the House, Democrats are now at the negotiation table, everything has to be there has to be compromise. There's forced compromise at that point. So we do need to think about, you know, as we strategize as a collective, where it's best to put our energy. And certainly with flipping seats in the state house, that is a great place to put our energy. And these national elections are so, so important. We should absolutely focus on those. But I can tell you that we have a primary coming up on May 21st. We'll be lucky, in my district, there's 45,000 eligible voters to participate in my race. We'll be lucky if we see 10,000 of those people show up. So there's a lot of work to be done. I see you standing, which suggests to me I need to hand the mic.
No. Because I started to see, we got warmed up. Now I'm starting to see hands. So now I'll call on some folks. We'll start with Marion.
Hi, Marion Myers, and this is something that I've thought for a while, and I just want to run it by. This is probably for Representative Draper, maybe for Ms. Albright. I have often thought in terms of the challenges that if challenges were made in Republican counties and made Republican election officials crazy, like they're making Democratic county officials crazy, that this law would be rescinded or there'd be a change. And I just thought I'd throw that out there and see what you think about it.
If you pass it around postcards talking about strategies, I'm not going to say, right? I can be that person because I do believe, I do believe, you know, and I always say, and I say this, if all you're doing is voting, you're not doing enough, period. It is one act, and oftentimes it's the very surface, it's the wade in the water act. But that is not how this country has changed, right? Our ancestors collectively in this room understood that, right? They understood the importance of voting, but they also understood the importance of protesting, courageously protesting. And so we got to go a little bit deeper like our brother Moses, right? Because he started out talking and telling God, hey, just be still, and God's going to do what? Part those waters. But God looked at him and was like, you better raise that staff and part these waters. That's kind of where we are right now. We got to get out of wading in the water, and we got to go in the water. And so I like your tactic. And we have to start thinking like that, right? Putting the kind of pressure in a way that will back them up till we get them 6 seats, because we're going to get them, right? Okay.
Michael.
I'm concerned about the voter challenges from perhaps the mechanism of it.
Hold the mic a little closer.
I'm concerned by the voter challenges perhaps from the mechanism of it. What I'm afraid of is that you'll have some districts or some precincts where the process of the chaos associated with the voter challenges will cause people who aren't being challenged but would never get a chance to vote because the line gets slowed up. Will that happen if somebody shows up that has been challenged? What happens? Does it slow up the rest of the line?
Potentially. So if somebody shows up and they've been challenged or they've been removed from the rolls, they'll have a different status. They might have to vote what they call challenged ballot, which is more paperwork, takes more time. An easy solution to this, though, aside from helping the people through the voter challenge process, is get everyone to vote early. Vote early, vote early, vote early, vote early. They've changed the laws that if you go to the wrong precinct on election day, it's highly likely that your ballot will not count. Also, because there's so much volume on election day, when something goes wrong, you feel the impact because the lines become so much longer. Also, all of these things, they happen more in Democratic counties because that's where we have population and density. So that they're never going to affect our Republican counties in the same way that they affect the Democratic counties. So for all of those reasons, something we have to get into people's minds is to please vote early.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question. We've talked, we'll still keep it going, but we've talked here about owning the power within Jewish community, right? That we have as a crew. I have said, when Jews show up as Jews, people pay attention. And so I'm wondering if you would talk about the role of religious folks, religious voices, owning that voice. How has that affected? How is that an alliance with the work that you all do? How do we think about that when we're going out into the world to do this work?
People of faith are understood to be moral leaders. And when we, under the banner of our faith, illustrate how important it is to exercise our vote and to bring others to vote and to be involved in every single activity that makes it possible for every single person to cast their ballot and have it counted, there's a moral resonance that's recognized in the wider society. There are reasons that people make a decision to vote or not vote, right? Some people may feel they're overwhelmed, their vote doesn't count, it doesn't matter, I'm too busy, or they're overburdened working 2 and 3 jobs and they just haven't been able to get there, or the polling place has been moved too far, and even or I tried on Tuesday during early voting and I didn't make it, and I tried on Wednesday and I couldn't get there, and I had to get my kids. So part of what we can do is be really clear as faith communities that part of being faithful is also participating in our democracy and making it possible for others to do the same. If we believe that every single person has been created in the image of God, then every single person should have the right and ability to cast their ballot and have it count in our democracy. So I think you can think creatively. I know congregations that have done pilgrimages to the polls, congregations that have done ritual blessings before traveling together to the polls. You figure out what works for this community and for communities to which you're connected, because I'm sure you don't just operate as a little congregation here, that you're part of a broader interfaith community here in the Atlanta area. And so I would encourage you to think about how you can take the commitments, the values, the rituals, and the traditions of your faith tradition and put them toward this purpose, which is really about respecting the image of God in every person and ensuring that their voice, their vote counts.
And I just want to say before I pass the mic that there's a reason why the civil rights leaders were rabbis and pastors. They had a real fundamental awareness that holiness was not just dealing with matters of morality, that morality encompassed more. So I think as we do our organizing, we can't just let the other side just have those discussions. We have to be very bold in our understanding of what is holy, right? What is church, right? And we have to make sure that our people in our community are aware of that. There are universal principles of liberation that run rampant. Whether you're talking about the Torah, whether you're talking about the King James Version of the Bible, there's rampant messages of liberation, which is why someone like Nat Turner, who was a slave, could read the same Bible that was teaching him to be oppressed, could then use that and say, we need to be free, right? And that is why we need to be able to not let the other side take hostages the messages of God. Be bold in it. Don't be afraid. You know what the messages are about. And so when you are organizing folks and you connecting with people and you're talking about voting, you help them feel like it is a temple synagogue experience, because voting is an extension of that. And so that's what we do. We don't let them just take hostage of God and make it be something that excludes us. There are progressive, right, messages that are rampant in every single holy book. And we need to remind our community of that when they get to go and make sure that their neighbors are okay, right, and are saved and are safe and healthy, that's just an extension of what we talk about in our temples, whether it's Sunday, Saturday, or Friday, whatever day it is. These are the messages that are true, and we need to make sure that we are just as loud about those messages. Like when I go to, Christian churches and talk about this, I talk about Luke 4:18. And Luke 4:18, for many Christians, is when people become ministers. But basically what he's saying is, I came in order to lift. I'm going to talk about it, right? And when I go in those churches and I talk about that passage, the reason why I do so is because what they will do, a lot of the conservative people, is try to take Jesus and hold him hostage, right? But when he announced why he was going to become a minister, he said, well, I came to set the captives free. I came to give sight to the blind. I came to heal the brokenhearted. If that ain't about liberation, I don't know what is, right? So I use that because I am not going to let the other side take hostage the universal messages of love and power that run rampant in all of our religions. And that's what I mean. Let's be bold in this process, because we need to help our brothers and sisters, right? Come to the right side. We need to help them come to the right side.
You don't want to follow that? You don't want to follow that? I just want our community to be a half as bold as what we heard from April.
And I just want to make a reflection.
This is our
since
music,
we're talking about Moses.
Just say this is our music director, Rebecca Goldsmith.
I'm going to say it.
Say it.
What I want to offer is that this beautiful idea of like, come on, get in the water. And Miriam and the women with their timbrels brought the people through, and I want to honor the three of you who are here, and Ellen. And women who do this work, and thank you for helping us find all of our ways through, our voices, all of our ways through. It takes all of us, but yeah.
Amen to that. We're going to have Rhina, we'll get the last question, and then, there's someone online? Steph, Rhina and then Steph.
Real quick.
We'll be quick.
How do we persuade young people that registering and voting is really going to make a difference in their life? Because a lot of them don't believe it.
I'll start this one. Here's a young person. If you feel like we don't want to put you on the spot either, but if you want to jump in, you just flag and we'll give it to you. But the young people that I'm talking about are pretty clear-eyed. And they've grown up in a time when they are not economically advancing as their parents did, when they can't afford the rent, when they're graduating with college degrees in debt above their eyeballs. They are frustrated with any number of things. They have less abortion rights than I did, right? Than we did. So they're mad. But that's something you can use, actually, and engage. Because as April was saying, voting's just one part of the puzzle, but it's a really fundamental, important part. I mean, just get it done, doggone it. Get out there early, vote it, get it done. Now, the thing is, though, you have to engage their anger and say, all right, I hear that you're angry. So let's talk about how your vote can be but one step toward changing these policies. There are a lot of people, young people right now that are saying, I'm not gonna vote because of Israel-Gaza, right? We've all seen it, we've heard this. But that, when you actually look at some of the larger surveys, the vast majority of young people are not saying that. There are some. But Worker Circle has been out with a whole bunch of young people who are very disillusioned with the direction of our country. But you know what? Most of them, when we engage them, when we meet them where they're at, and when we listen to them, really listen to what they're upset about, and say, look, this isn't just about me trying to get you there in November. It's about what we can do together after November, in December and January and the next year, that it's not a one and done kind of thing. Then young people get it, right? They're like, oh, I'm not just a means to your end. Instead, we can build together the kind of America we must become. Voting's one part of it, an essential part. It's not the only part, but it's one step. And I find that young people are pretty smart. And it's when you meet them where they're at, they tend to respond. You're not always going to win everybody. That's true for old people too, like me, you know, right? But I think young people are quite smart and clear-eyed. Representative young person in the room, we don't want to do that to you, but please feel free to chime in.
Okay, so hi, my name is Milan. I'm gonna keep it just kind of brief. I'm just trying to put myself in the mind space of, you know, my young crowd and constituents. But I think just personally, I can just say as a younger adult trying to navigate in the world, I think some of the hesitation comes from frustration, and then instead of finding that drive to be proactive and fight through it, it's kind of just like oh, well, nothing's gonna change, or, you know, so what's the point? And then they just rather give up instead of just doubling down and just like keep fighting, you know, to get the changes that we need accomplished. So I think just finding like more creative ways to just educate, because I hear a lot of uneducated responses and opinions, and it's just like, you know, if you had the information, then maybe you wouldn't be so loud and wrong. That's just my opinion. But and then I'm not exactly sure how or if this may happen one day in the future, but I think getting younger people in those higher positions will also help the message too. Yeah, because it's easier for younger people to identify with a younger person rather than a 75, 80 plus. And I'm not age shaming, I promise. I'm just saying it's easier to relate to somebody that you see, like you align yourself more with. So just getting like, you know, younger people more on the higher stage of, you know, information.
I think you raised such an important point, and all of us here should be looking at young people and saying, are you thinking about running for political office because we need your voice? And supporting young people who are prepared to take that next step. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Young folks like us, we want to see it work. The same young folks that you may not see at the polls, what do you see them in the streets? You see them on these campuses, you see them in the streets, because they see that works, right? And so what we talk about all the time when we see that apathy that you may see is really intelligence, because the truth of the matter is voting doesn't work for everybody, right? And it takes time for voting to work. You may get one seat, you might get her in, but you got 30 other people who are not going to be progressive in their ideology and their votes. And so we spend more time seeing the fruit of those 30 than we can see the fruit of her. And so it's a sustained effort, and a lot of folks don't make that connection. They just see it don't work. I still got a pothole. I went and voted last week, and I've still got a pothole in my neighborhood, right? And they remember that. But they remember that when I went and protested, the mayor came down there to the protest. The city council had to talk about it at their meeting. The president is on TV talking about it. Some type of resolution got passed. It may be BS, but they passed that resolution. The whole city of Ferguson, a lot of people don't know this, changed completely after the protests happened. The policing changed, the mayor, all that changed, not from voting, but from people going to the streets, which is why you see so much of that now. So we start letting voting work, guess what's gonna happen? People are gonna see it as a viable tool. So when young people tell you that they don't wanna vote because it doesn't do anything, the first thing and the first reaction that you can say is, you know what, you might be right. Validate what they're saying because they are talking about their lived experience. And as Noel said, now let's talk together. We gotta get more than her there. We got 3 more seats we gotta get, and if we can get those 3 seats, and if you help me do that, then guess what's gonna happen? Your pothole gonna get fixed quickly, right? So I think when I hear that about young folks, I just wanna raise that. It's reality for them. It's real for them. But this young sister right here ran for office, and she's now a state representative. And so there's so many, and young folks are so effective that if you look around the country, what are conservative people trying to pass now? They're trying to increase the age for running for office. They are trying to find ways. They just don't even care about the U.S. Constitution anymore. They're like, well, they shouldn't be voting. I don't care if they're, So that is why, because guess what? They are making change. They are change agents. They are moving this country. So, don't worry about those young folk. They out there doing it, and they're changing, and they're really going to make, as they always have. If it weren't for students, I can guarantee you the suffrage movement for women in this room, the civil rights movement would not have happened. Those folks on those buses that were going back and forth in the face of danger, you know how old they were? These were 18, 19, 20, 21. These were college students that made this country change and this Constitution change. And in that same tradition, they're doing it today. So I'm extremely encouraged, quite frankly. And I love having that conversation because I know that they know that voting is just not enough, right? In order to bring change here.
Okay, we're gonna let Steph ask her question if she still wants to, and then we're gonna close. Hopefully we can hear you.
It wasn't a question, it was just a couple things I was gonna bring up that I thought would be kind of useful and based on some of the things that we talked about. One of the things that was brought up earlier is that there was something that passed recently. There was a question about whether or not it was constitutional and whether or not there would be a lawsuit or anything, or anyone would be able to go after it. And I was going to suggest contacting Mark Elias with the Democracy Docket. He's really good. A lot of the lawsuits that were won before 22, a lot of the reason that voter suppression laws did not pass, it was him and his folks, and he's pretty much on top of everything in every state. So reach out to Mark Elias and the Democracy Docket. If something, he may already be on top of it, but if not, send something his way, and his team will get on it if they're not already on it. So I wanted to put that out there. Something that we were just talking about, and I just grabbed it because I thought it'd be useful. There's a group called Leaders We Deserve HQ. The email to them is info@e.leaderswedeserve.com. It's run by David Hogg, well, no longer a kid, but the kid from Parkland School. And basically, they fundraise and sponsor the next generation of leaders, getting quote unquote kids into state houses around the country. Young kids fighting for, well, I keep saying young, sorry, I'm feeling old these days. I'm 57, but in any case, if you know somebody who wants to run or would consider running, they're fundraising to put the money behind them. Like they just sent out an email about the new endorsements they dropped for 2024. around the country, in Tennessee, we're talking about in the South, in Tennessee, in Florida, in North Carolina. I mean, basically, they're funding the next generation. And so if you know somebody, that's somebody who to contact to try and get funding to support them. So just wanted to send that in your direction.
That is
And then
really, real quick,
yeah.
real quick,
And then-
Steph. We're gonna try and wrap up.
Okay. And then the last thing I was going to throw out was just, you know, it's great to really be courageous, but it would be very helpful to put something out there that, to publish something that says what's legal that you can do. So for example, is it legal to carry in your backpack voter registration forms and pass them out to people? Is it legal, for example, to have on your laptop or on your iPad something that if you, that you can get people to sign up and you can have them, you can sign people up in the grocery store? Is that legal, or is somebody going to arrest you? Is it legal to drive people to the polls, or is that not, has that now been passed that you cannot bring people? So basically, it would be really useful, and this is for Syra, to put together a list of what you can do and will not be arrested for based
so
on the latest registration.
I'll ask, are all those things legal or are any of them illegal?
It depends, it depends, which is why I think it's so important to work with groups that do this day in and day out, and specifically that do it in the South, because we have a lot of well-meaning folks that come in from other places that don't understand the nuance and the risk of organizing in Georgia, because maybe something.
And that's what I'm talking about, is specifically in Georgia. There's a lot of new
Yeah, so we want to be mindful of folks' time, so we're just going to let Syra finish, and then I've got some final comments, and we should keep talking. I'm glad there's enthusiasm.
That's it.
Okay, so work with groups on the ground. So a few quick announcements and some thank yous. If you're in, well, we know that the Democracy Circle at CBH is being formed. The sign-up sheets are over here, which are going to be connected to the Tikkun Olam Committee for further action. Later this week, you are going to receive an email with a list of actions you can take, and they'll be culled from the ones that we have offered, and ways to sign up for the ones you choose. Some thank yous. First of all, a huge thank you to our speakers, Representative Draper, to Noel, to April. Thank you so much. Thank you to our volunteers, starting off with Ellen Mazer, Andy Siegel, Anthony Russell, Mike Sigler, Jane Diamond, Lily Baxter, Tamara Caldas, Jackie Sherman, Liza Marks, Amy Lighthill, and Marion Myers, and our tireless staff led by our Executive Director, Haley Monet, Cara Levine Brenner, Lori Slack, Emily is it Anzalone or Anzalone? Anzalone. Excellent. Big round of applause. Notice that when, I just love that you brought the story of Moses and the Israelites walking through and not just praying, right? Don't just stand there, move into the water. It says that, you know, we want to get out of here and serve God. They could have been nice Jews in slavery to eat. They would have, you know, they made their little Shabbos and their little, right? But that wasn't the point. The point was to take this stuff, these Torahs, these rules, these teachings, these values, and to take them outside. And so to take what we learn here, what we study here, who we are together, and march, and to keep moving. So I'm going to invite you to keep moving to the snacks, and then to keep moving and to make a difference and to do some healing in this world that desperately needs it. Thank you all for being here. Yes, please.